Perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here, everybody. I am in my dungeon of a home office, so I do apologize. The lighting is kind of like spooky. But I have multiple screens too, so in case you see me looking other directions, my partner, he is a software developer, so he's into tech, computers, fancy pants, so this is his setup. This is not mine. But I'm glad that you're here today, and I'm glad this session is being recorded because a lot of students have reached out to me with questions regarding fundraising and what student groups can and can't do. So today I'm going to kind of go over some of the major items. I'm happy to answer questions along the way. Do know, like, I am not a financial expert. I don't work for the IRS, so I might not know all of the intricate questions, but I can definitely keep track of those, or Michaela can help me with that, and we can follow up with our business specialist people who would know those things. So just so we're on the same page, fundraising is really defined as any income-based producing activity. That's regardless of whether or not a profit is actually realized. So keep that in mind when we're talking about fundraising. So let's get started here. And I'm multiple screens. Okay, so some key information to know before we actually get into the act of fundraising is what kind of accounts that we have for student groups. And this is kind of where a lot of the questions kind of stem from. So every student group that gets created has an operating account, even if they don't use it. That is like part of Michaela's process. An organization gets approved, then an operation account is created. So even if you don't think you have one, you probably do. We have a whole spreadsheet of all sorts of operating accounts. And I'll kind of go over what goes into those. But basically, those are kind of worked in conjunction with SABC allocations. A fundraising account can also be created for groups, but that's not automatic. That has to be requested. So the two main accounts are the operating account that everyone has, and we'll go over the differences in just a moment. And then the optional fundraising account, which is what your group's going to want to request if they're wanting to do a lot of fundraising or self-generated revenue activities. So what are the differences? So like I mentioned, operating accounts are linked to operations of a student organization. Like I mentioned in the last slide, these are mostly used for SABC allocating or allocations, purchases, charges via that avenue. All operating accounts, and this is important, so if you're kind of halfway paying attention, pay attention now. All operating accounts in the system. So I'm talking Mindy Daly's Office of Student Involvement operating account, Michaela Wells' Student Management operating account. I'm going to use Prism, they're your operating account. Every operating account at the end of the fiscal year gets swept back to zero. It doesn't matter if you have put in your own self-generated revenue into that account. Any operating account gets swept back to the system as a whole and then gets reallocated next fiscal year. Do not deposit anything into an operating account. In fact, if your group had brought to my desk a deposit, we would have talked about what this looks like. What was kind of interesting is I guess that was not a new process, but that was something that our office became aware of, I would say 3 or 4 years ago now. So if you've been around a while, you may remember there were a couple of years where there was communication out about like, if you spend this money, it's getting swept, because that was kind of now that is happening every year, it's getting swept to zero. So do not deposit into an operating account, okay? Fundraising accounts, on the other hand, they do not get swept. That is where you want to deposit any self-generated revenue. Operating accounts get swept. Do not deposit. Fundraising account, that is where you can deposit that self-generated revenue, because that money rolls over. And we actually do have, I don't want to say 10 to 15 groups that already have a fundraising account. If your group charges membership dues, like internally, like locally, or if you've done a lot of fundraising activities in the past, your group probably has a fundraising account. And Michaela and I can help. If you're curious, you can send us an email and we'll let you know if you have one. And then if not, we can go ahead and start getting you created one. So a few caveats with fundraising accounts that they still have to follow like system and university purchasing policies. So we can't purchase gift cards with them. You can't purchase alcohol. One other caveat about fundraising accounts we've run into is the university cannot write a check to a charitable organization. So that's something to keep in mind if your group is wanting to raise funds for Stray Rescue of St. Louis, which I donate to them every month. I love them. But say you do, you sell stickers on the bridge and you make $50 and you're wanting to give that to Stray Rescue. I think that we would probably work a system where you just beelined us and went right to Stray Rescue and gave them the $50 as opposed to depositing it into the fundraising account, because the fundraising account cannot then write a check to Stray Rescue for $50. You can purchase things out of your fundraising account for upcoming programs. You can do registrations to conferences if that's what you are kind of working towards. So just do know there are still a few caveats to the fundraising account. And I'm not encouraging groups to get their own outside bank account, but do know that would be a separate option. That's up to you. And then that could be spent, what we don't have a hand in, we don't police. So keep that in mind. Any quick questions? Let me check the chat about those two accounts. No. Any questions before I move on? Main takeaway, do not deposit into operating accounts. But even if you would have brought that to me, we would have told you not to. So I think you're all good. Moving on. So as you can see from the screen and the little blurb there about the mission of SABC, Student Activity Budget Committee fees, the mission is really to partially fund the support of student groups. Because that funding line really cannot fully sustain all student groups. We ran out of money about, I guess that was last fall, or maybe it was last spring, by like the end of February. So then any group that wanted money after that, we were just out, and that's not really good in the sense of what SABC should doing. So it's understandable that groups would need to look for other funding avenues. I know a lot of groups have done a good job of maybe co-sponsoring with an academic department that kind of falls in line with their student organization, and maybe they can help pay for marketing materials or the room reservations or what have you. But fundraising may be required. So we kind of understand that. And so we understand there's a lot of questions around that. So one thing that you need to keep in mind about SABC funds is that those funds cannot be used to purchase things you are then going to sell. So you can't use student activity money to make a profit. So SABC can't float you the money to purchase t-shirts that you're then going to turn around and sell for a profit and then just get all of that revenue as your own. SABC can help pay for if you're going to host a trivia night or something like that. We can maybe help cover some of the room reservation costs, some of those administrative things. Yeah, because SABC is not in the business of laundering money and floating funds to help you cover revenue, but that kind of just makes sense. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page there. Okay, so bake sales is something that I get asked about all the time. And I'm going to be honest, there are a lot of challenges that come with bake sales. First is that selling this type of food is actually against our food provider contract and can kind of be seen as in competition with a university auxiliary. So that could potentially make us breach of our contract with our food provider, Sodexo. On top of that, there are so many liability risks that come with selling homemade food. And you would hate to potentially contaminate someone who had a serious food allergy. It can't be, purchasers don't feel they can't be confident that this food was baked in a commercial kitchen that was sanitized up to health code, had a health permit, had a proof of insurance as a food provider. So really, I don't want to say bake sales are completely out of the question 100%, but I would say they are probably out 99.9% just due to all of those things. If you were really set on doing a bake sale, that would probably be a conversation that Michaela and I would have to have with you, along with our director of event services, director of the Millennium Student Center, and probably our vice provost for student affairs, to how are we going to make sure that this is safe? What happens if something comes up? And I know this all kind of seems silly. I know when I was a collegiate member, I was like, what's the big deal? But now as a professional, and some of you probably realize this is food that could be harmful, even though that's not the intent. So bake sales are just like super risky, and I'm not sure they're totally worth it. But again, there's that 0.01% or 0.1%. If you are interested, we can maybe work it out. But later on in a few slides, we're going to talk about maybe some other fundraisers that may be worth it and a better use of your time. Oh, thank you. Next slide, actually. So I like to use an acronym KISS. So that is keep it simple, silly. You may have heard like keep it simple, stupid. I don't like that. So it's keep it simple, silly. The best fundraisers are really the ones that are not so involved. There's all these moving parts that really it turns out to be more trouble than it's worth. So I know I mentioned trivia night a few moments ago. St. Louis loves them some trivia nights. And I think if you are a well-oiled machine, like some of these non-for-profit organizations that have a staff to help program these types of things, trivia nights could be helpful. If it's just a few UMSL students who in their free time are trying to figure that out, that's kind of a lot. We got to figure out room reservations. Are we going to have a raffle? Who's going to make up the questions? Who's going to score? They're going to serve me food there. We're going to sell tickets. That is kind of a lot. Not saying you can't do it, but I think sometimes fundraisers don't have to be that involved. I think us St. Lucians just jump to, trivia nights because that's what we're kind of used to. But some easy ones, and I say easy in quotations, they still take effort. A lot of St. Louis restaurants will do like a dine and donate event. I know I've seen a couple of the fraternities and sororities do that where they've, I'm thinking Chipotle's done it, California Pizza Kitchen, Panda Express. There's several others where you'll have a flyer that has like a promo code, and anyone that comes and orders from Panda Express on Wednesday, February 21st between 5 and 9, if they use this code, 10% of their purchase gets then donated back to your organization. It's like those, that's great. I mean, your club needs to hustle and get the information out, get the fundraising code out there, potentially even talk to the restaurant about if you could have some members there to tell people about the code. But that is way easier than all those logistics of a large an event that you may be thinking of. I know I get a bunch of emails from like Krispy Kreme and Pizza Hut, are just two that are coming to my head, where they offer like fundraising opportunities where students can sell dozens of donuts. And for every dozen you sell, a few dollars gets kicked back to the organization. And I have contact information for any of these if anyone's interested. I've also seen Pizza Hut ones where you sell large pizzas and then however, whatever the kickback is, you get that. You don't have to deal with putting the pizzas together, baking the pizzas, any of that. You're just kind of facilitating the purchase. A lot of times it's online even. So you literally have to do nothing. You don't even have to like deliver the donuts. I'm pretty sure they could just get like a code in their email. Then another one that's kind of simple is like a raffle. If you're able to get something donated, that's kind of cool, and maybe students or campus would be interested, and you're able just to sell raffle tickets for $1 or something, easy peasy. And then you raffle off who wins it. Again, these are just examples of things that fundraising doesn't have to be super labor intensive, especially knowing just how overworked and stretched thin you all are already. So those are a few examples of things that I've seen done well in terms of fundraising. Again, I'm no expert. I do want to make sure that I share some cautionary tales, words of caution. So I want a few main questions that I want you to think about, you and your group, when you're thinking about fundraising. Is one, like, who is keeping track of money? AKA like who's actually holding on to the cash that we get or the checks? Who's keeping a ledger of the money? So like, who's keeping record that Mindy Daly donated $5 to Delta Zeta's raffle that they had? I can't remember. yeah, it was still just a raffle last semester or whatever. Like we need to be keeping track of all of that. And then where is the money going? So is it going into one of your operating accounts, which we've talked about that those get swept? Probably not the best idea. Is it going to go into a university fundraising account that Michaela and I have gotten set it up for you? Is it going into your off-campus student club group that I don't want anything to do with? You need to all be on the same page about where that money is going. We have, I mean, just in my 6 years at UMSL, I have seen some challenging word choice there, some challenging situations. Really, this is all to cover your own booties. So I would also always have some type of receipt to give to folks. If you're planning a fundraising, they actually sell like cash receipt books that are y'all are probably too young for this, but they're 2-layered. You write really hard on the top, you hand that to the individual, and then there's like a carbon copy on that second layer that you keep in the book. That could be something you ask SABC for, and we'd be happy to cover that for you, because there needs to be some type of receipt. There needs to be detailed notes on what money is coming in and then where it's going. And then and this is awful because I understand that Venmo and Cash App are just the easiest ways to do things. And in fact, I was just talking to someone the other day, like, what did we do before Venmo? Like, ugh. But it just gets really troubling and it's hard to keep track. Like that's an individual's personal account tied to those Cash Apps or Venmos. So I think that if you're gonna do that, and I'm not necessarily saying you should, I would get an advisor rolled in. I would maybe even kind of create, I know this sounds dramatic, create some type of agreement that, okay, Mindy, you're going to be the Venmo that we're sending this to. We're going to create an agreement that you're going to sign here, that you're going to transfer the money on this date, because it has just gotten kind of icky. Just a couple situations that I can think of off the top of my head. One example, it wasn't really a fundraising situation, but a group several years ago was going to a local conference, and one student paid for it, and then everyone kind of Venmoed them. Well, then the conference got canceled. So that student that paid got the refund and then ghosted everybody. So there was no way to, well, I Venmoed them, and then now there's no way for me to get my refund because they've ghosted. I've also seen a situation a couple of years ago. There was a student group that kind of did like a change war type thing where they had a bucket of change. And it literally, I got an email from like a campus department. I was like, hey, we have this bucket of change. We don't know where it's from. So they brought it to our office. Some officer came and grabbed it. And then when the advisor was like, hey, where are these? It was like $40 or something like that. The student was like, oh, I used it to buy these things. They were for the club, but those purchases weren't approved. They weren't overseen by anything. So that's kind of where fundraising gives me a little, is, you know, potentially this could be lots of money that someone's handling. And we're really kind of relying on individuals. And I'm not saying all these individuals that have been kind of risky have been bad people. Things just happen. So I think if you're going to do fundraising, I want your group to really be clear, like what we're charging, where is this money going, who's handling the money, what record are we keeping. This sounds dramatic, but if you're even doing a raffle, I would keep a ledger. Like Michaela Wells on 12/21 stopped by, about 5 raffle tickets for $1. Total donation $5. And then if you had the receipts, you would also have that record too. So I don't want you to think that I'm sitting here saying, oh, fundraising is so hard. The only part that makes me nervous is just the funds and where do those go. And I want to make sure that no one gets into a bad situation with, well, we had, Mindy, you had our $50. Where do you go? And then Mindy, not really, but I could say, what are you talking about? I never had $50. No one gave me that. Whereas if there was a contract sign or an agreement, your advisor had been looped in, there was cash receipts and a ledger, that'd be a little hard for Mindy to say, what are you talking about? As I pocket the $50. So all in all, in this whole presentation, I talked a lot. A few things I want to make sure is that if you are wanting to generate self-revenue, you do not want to deposit it into your operating account. we will want to create a fundraising account for you if you're wanting to keep those funds in the university setting. You can do them outside however you wish, but I don't want to be part of that. And also, just if you're gonna involve cash money, where is that? Who has it? And a ledger of what is spent. That's why sometimes some of those commercial corporate fundraising opportunities sometimes are for the best, because really, like, Krispy Kreme deals with how much money they're collecting, people pay online, and then Krispy Kreme would just write Artist Anonymous a check. And then once we got that check, we would determine, is that going into your fundraising account? Where is that going? So there's not petty cash being floated around, change being given. It is, they've talked to Krispy Kreme. Krispy Kreme sends us a check, if that makes sense. I didn't think I would go the whole time, but I think there is something in the chat. Let me see if there's a question here. If we get a large donation of product, who would sign the tax receipt? Is there a limit on how much we can take in? Good question, Bob. And someone giving you a bunch of product?
They might. Actually, I just today found out we could get a lot of product that we could then either raffle or offer around, but we don't really. But I'm like, how do I take that in? Who
Right.
signs their tax receipt for their, so if that's for them, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm copy and pasting that note, and I will follow up because I'm not 100% sure. I think if it was going to be like a one-off, hey, I'm giving you this portable speaker to raffle off as a prize that was, like, not super costly, I would say la 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 la.
Right.
You
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
you.
No, this is a big.
Yeah.
This would be like several $1000s worth of product.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Well,
Yeah.
Bob, let me look into that and I will circle back with you. So if anyone else is
Awesome.
expecting a big ol' donation, let me know. But I think actually, Bob, this is a good example of how groups could potentially solicit some different help for events as opposed to just relying on SABC for all of that funding. Because one, SABC doesn't fund everything, and you may be wanting to do something that they don't fund. So go find you some. It's a good question. I don't know the answer, but I will get it for you. And I don't
All
think
right. Thank you.
either, because I don't think we've dealt with that. But
all right. Thanks.
yeah. Are there any questions? I oversee the student involvement email, so that would be like me you're emailing. Just sometimes when I get so many emails to my Mindy UMSL account, things get lost a little. In fact, probably half of you have had an email that I was like, oh shit, sorry, this got stuck in the black hole that is my inbox. So sometimes if you email that it stays nice and clean, it gets responded to quickly. So if you have any questions, or if you're wondering if your group has a fundraising account already, or you're interested in that, please feel free to shoot that my way. I'm seeing, are there things that we absolutely cannot do? It kind of depends. So I think kind of going through some of the situations I've talked about earlier, I guess I would need a little more information, Jonathan, about kind of what you're wondering, because I can't cover everything that you can't do. Has to be legal. Bake sales are normally off the table. But Jonathan, if you have a specific situation, I'm happy to chat with you afterwards and we can figure that out. Okay, well, I think Michaela is going to throw in the attendance sheet. Please make sure you fill that out. We've had a lot of groups like, no, we were there. Well, we don't have any way to confirm that unless you fill out the form. So please make sure you fill that out. I hope you learned a little something today. I get a lot of questions about fundraising. I'm always happy to brainstorm or to answer specific questions if you have an idea and you're not totally sure if it's doable or not. I'm happy to chat with you on that. I just want to make sure you all are safe.